Hi, everyone. Out there on the Zoom screen, I'm Nellie Oleansis. I'm the chair of Classics, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this event this morning, sponsored by Classics and Rhetoric. This morning, we're going to get to hear Talos Dreams, which is a piece by Costas Dafnis that was commissioned by the Greek Chamber Music Project and inspired by Adrienne Mayor's book, Gods and Robots. So we're kind of excited to hear, hey, Adrienne, so we're excited to hear what this is gonna sound like. And
talking.
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. And the one thing I wanted to say is because we are all on the Zoom screen, if everyone at this point could mute themselves and also turn off their video, I'm going to do that as well. That will, solve the bandwidth problems for the duration of the performance. So welcome everyone, and looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. I would say that was sensational, and in the etymological sense of the word, because you really provided us with an outburst of sensations, visual and sonic. And it's really fantastic to be able to think through you, thanks to you, about Talos, not as an object or a robotic object or a robotic subject described through words, but really have a sense of the sound of the metal. Really, I through your performance, Talos becomes what has been called vibrant matter. And so what we just got, thanks to you, is a beautiful synesthetic experience, a beautiful entanglement of sound and sight. Uh, so my name is Mario Tello, and I teach classics and comparative literature at UC Berkeley. And I would love now to invite everyone to post questions or comments in the chat. But in the meantime, I would like Costas Dafnis to tell us something about the performance, and in particular about the instruments, the ghost plate that he used for this performance. And that's a beautiful word, the ghost plate, which also captures another aspect of the performance, that is its ghostly spectral quality, which also gives us a strong sense of antiquity, of the sound, I would say, of antiquity, the sound of ancestrality, which at the same time sounds so modern, so avant garde. So, Costas, please.
Thank you, Mario. I appreciate that. Yes, absolutely. That was what we were going for with this piece. We ever since we kind of started talking about it, we knew that we wanted it to involve technology and to kind of experiment that interesting line, kind of based on the inception of the idea, which is that even in ancient times, a lot of the ideas that we still kind of think of as far off were being explored through philosophy and music and art and other things. And so the ghost plate specifically, I think most of you should be able to see one of another screen. You can see I'm Konstantinos on here. There's a Costas Dafnis screen that you can also go see, and that is on the Zoom window here, and that is the ghost plate itself. And so you saw it in a few different videos, but it's uh, it's an interesting instrument based on a family of instruments from an experimental musician in the Bay Area named Tom Nunn. It's his space plate series that as he calls it, and you can see from the image there that it's a large piece of stainless steel with different kinds of metal welded upward to it. I got to weld this with Tom, so that was a lot of fun. And I tuned all of the rods by actually cutting them down. And so working with metal, that was my first time really working with metal, and it was amazing. It's an amazing feeling to kind of feel like you can manipulate and control something kind of inhuman, I should say, as metal. And it was really a fantastic experience. And the instrument itself actually rests on balloons. And so there are these balloons in buckets that allow it to be almost completely frictionless. And so that's what gives it a lot of that ghostly quality, is that as it's being played, either with the bow or striking the tines or otherwise, there can be this almost, seemingly unending ring to the sound, entirely acoustically. So I actually would like to just play it a little bit live here, if I can click on those microphones. So I'll disappear from this screen and you'll see me on the other one in just one moment. But basically what I'll do is I'll show you some of the main effects that I used throughout the piece that you just heard, and kind of give you some explanation to some of the stranger sounds that we got too. So I'll be right over there. See you in 2 seconds. Okay, so you should be able to hear me. My microphones are coming through the ghost plate now, but you should be able to mostly hear the sound. The main way that the ghost plate is played is by accidentally striking it. But the next most common way is by using a bow in each hand, and so that was a lot of the sounds that you heard. For instance, the very opening motif that came back a few different times was something like this. And so you can hear how much ring it has. Some might be coming through my voice, in fact, because the microphones are underneath the plate. But so that was the main way that you evoke a lot of the tonal sounds of the instrument. But it's such an unpredictable instrument, which is what I loved about it. And I actually brought that intentionally to the other instruments. So huge thank you to Ellie on flute, Kyle on oboe, Lewis on cello, and of course Ariel on violin for basically taking instruments that they know very well and being asked to do all sorts of things with them that they probably didn't expect. But one of the things that I like about the instrument is its unpredictability. For instance, out of a single rod here, so I'm just going to stick to this large rod here in the back, and I'm just going to play only that rod without any other variation. You can hear how many different sounds can happen just from differing amounts of pressure and speed of the bow. So those different partials are part of what inspired, especially the movement Pandora, because there was a little bit of a crossover in my mind between the way that this particular instrument jumps its partials kind of through the harmonic series, and there's an apocryphal story about Pythagoras, right, which all musicians are going to be very well familiar with, and of course we all know his theorem, but in this apocryphal story about basically how he kind of started to codify the harmonic series by dividing a string in half and hearing the next partial and all of that. It's kind of a natural exploration of the acoustic world. And the story is, I don't think it was anything related in reality, but that's not necessarily what we're trafficking in today. It was the idea that he had passed a smithy. Pythagoras passed a smithy and heard the different bars of metal being struck, and he noticed that there were different consonances and dissonances depending on what was happening, basically which hammers and which pieces of metal were being struck, and kind of got into went into the smithy and said, what's happening here, and investigated and realized that the greatest amount of consonance was when one bar was twice as long as another. And so basically the idea is that as the harmonic series moves up, you get all those partials. And so trying to pull those out of this instrument is fascinating because it doesn't actually, because it is welded, this is one piece of metal basically because it's all welded. And so it doesn't behave in the partials the way that you would expect. Well, so the other main ways that it's played, and I also got this from Tom Nunn. He used a piece of driftwood, and I use this stick right here, or a different piece of wood. Natural material works really nicely in conjunction with the metal. But you can just through friction, you can just drag it along the plate basically, and control a really kind of ghostly, haunting tone, or then all the way into some more exciting kind of War of the Worlds, sort of sounds. Some of which you heard in movements like Solitude, for instance. So here's an example of that. And then the other main way that the instrument was played for this particular recording, outside of being audio, processed in audio format, was by striking the different rods. So you can get something kind of approximating a vibraphone or kind of a marimba, or more of a metallic sound, of course. So you kind of So that is the ghost plate. I'm going to move back over to my other camera, and if anybody has any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you so much, Costas. That was fabulous. And so I would like also to hear the voices of Ariel and Kyle and Lewis and Ellie. So, uh, and of course, I'm going to ask questions coming from the audience, but maybe I can start by saying that it's so interesting that Constance mentioned Pandora in relation to partial sounds and partial sensations, because Pandora is really an assemblage, of gifts, of things coming from different gods. And so there is this idea of singular plurality or a plural singularity, which in a sense you guys instantiate, as an assemblage, of instruments and as an assemblage of people. So I wonder whether your own fascination with ancient robotics, and in particular with Talos, can be seen as an attraction motivated by a kind of resemblance between the musician who plays an instrument and makes the materiality of the instrument, part of her own body, and the ancient figures like Talos, who disrupt the opposition between animate and inanimate, and features of the body, features of other bodies like instruments or other prostheses that become essential to being. So there is a sense in which being a musician is really a beautiful demonstration of what some people have called the prostheticity of being, the fact that you need, instruments that are non-human, non-animate in a conventional sense in order to exist, to function, and to act. So I don't know whether anyone would like to respond to that.
Well, I'll start it off. I would love to hear from the other players about that too, because one of the interesting things about this project is we began speaking about it before the pandemic, and so it moved into a different format for this presentation. Pretty quickly after we began speaking about it, and one of the interesting opportunities that gave us was, in that we lost the live element of being able to play kind of all together in the same room. We now had to interact through these machines. We had to interact through different computers, and we had to kind of work together. You saw in the videos that a lot of the videos that we put together were done remotely. So everybody was in their own living room or studio or wherever else, and we had to actually kind of assemble them together. And then so there was an entire other kind of instrument character in the final mix that wasn't planned. Maybe it was the hope, at the bottom of the box or the bottom of the jar. But I would say that the electronic element of it is definitely became another player in the ensemble, because the way that the electronics were processed, but then also the way that they were performed. And so it's interesting the way that you kind of spoke about the prostheticity of it, because it definitely felt that way, even if it wasn't intentional from the beginning. In the same sense that kind of became true in an emergent way, for sure. And I would love to hear actually from any of the players, maybe even specifically about solitude, the way that it was kind of notated. Was definitely outside the box. They were asked to basically play a poem from Wallace Stevens. And so they were given kind of strictures based on the ghost plate that allowed them to kind of play within that realm. But yeah, no. So Ariel, Lewis, Kyle, Ellie, any of you want to kind of weigh in on that?
Yeah. So just to elaborate, basically we had words, and we were told, and we had a meeting, and so we were playing the words, and then I'm talking to Costas about what are we, what kind of techniques are we doing, and basically, you saw us in the beginning. I was muting my cello, like muting the strings with my left hand by applying more than one stop, basically, and not really fully stopping the string, and then doing tremolo and sol ponticello, which means playing close to the bridge, just getting wacky sounds, but with the meter of the text. And it's just forces your brain to think about how to play your instrument in a different way, because especially in the classical tradition, we're so used to just playing the notes on the page, and then anything else is like you know what I mean? But luckily, I think everybody in this group plays more than just classical. So we're and I'm sure a lot of people who are really just classical players, they would do great too. But it's a leap. I am not trying to put them down or anything.
Just to speak to that also, yeah, we're all classically trained. We went to music school or conservatory, and there's a particular kind of direction for our training. We're used to playing live in person with other people, especially in chamber music. We're we're expected to listen and adapt in real time to the other players. And the thing that was so interesting about this project is that that was all delayed. We were essentially programmed. We had this modular way of recording our parts at home, in little sections and whatever, and any feedback we were given would happen a week or two at a time. Say, let's go back and do that section. Where normally in a traditional concert or rehearsal setting, we're adapting in the moment instantaneously. So that was a really interesting process for me. I had just set up a recording space during the pandemic. This was the motivator to do that, to record from home. So there was an entirely new skill set and equipment to acquire. And anyway, it's been really rewarding. I'm glad we're able to make this all happen.
I suppose I can add a word or two. Thank you, Mario. It's fascinating to hear you frame it in that way, because I personally hadn't explicitly gone there. I hadn't thought about this particular project in those terms. But you're absolutely right that uh, the role of technology and embodiment and prosthetics among musicians is something that is always an elephant in the room for us. Within the context of the classical music tradition that the five of us are all trained within, and that both Ellie and Lewis have spoken to. It's kind of funny because there have been all sorts of controversies over the years of what is and isn't technology, right? And those who want to hold the line and have a more conservative view of music were mortified when radio technology and recording technology started being permitted into the mix around about 1930, 1940, 1950, right? And yet this is mechanical age technology, right? This is state of the art, circa 1600 in Western Europe, right? Uh, and yet through this whole process, here we are, having to wrestle with this, with new dimensions of technologies across centuries, having to do this over Zoom, having to do this over learning new internet platforms as we go, troubleshooting up to and including this very moment. Actually, it's kind of fascinating to have that tangle.
Yeah, really, the musician gives us a strong sense of the cyborgic nature of the human. So that's something that you really bring out with this, and it's fascinating. Thank you, Ariel.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to I think maybe in some ways the ideas of this piece came out even more because we were forced to really reckon with technology and to do things this way, because I think it's part of the whole concept. And kind of speaking to what Kyle is saying about, what is an instrument, or what, we have the mechanical technology which creates the physical instruments we play. And I think there is still debate out there about whether electronics counts as an instrument. And that's a whole debate in itself. But I think that this is a piece that's perfect for exploring that boundary, especially considering that we are forced now to use technology to do this. And I think for me, it really the thing that it really brought to me was, especially because I spent a lot of time on Zoom doing teaching, is just how um, artificial it all feels. And there's a complete difference between being in the room with a bunch of people playing together versus interacting with a recording, even though the recordings are made by the people you would have interacted with anyway. But there's a very different, I think, just interaction that we as people have when we're working with technology versus when we're working in person with someone. I think we just automatically do things a little bit differently. And I think for me, especially as a classically trained musician, I think something that's really emphasized is this idea of perfection and preciseness and wanting things to be a very specific way. Um, and really, like in my experience, the times when you could be the most expressive is being in the moment. And what I found for this is all of, I think, the kind of the worst tendencies of my classical training was what came out as this kind of extra neuroticism of listening back to recorded takes, and oh, that note wasn't the exact perfect pitch and timbre and everything that I wanted. So now I can go back and I can redo it, thousands of times if I really wanted to get the perfect note. And that's just impossible to do in a live performance of any kind. So I think this really highlights the different ways we interact with technology, for better or for worse, and how it affects our music making, and also just our interactions and our relationships to the people we make music with.
Yeah, if I can add one thing, I thought that one of the most beautiful, I would say even moving moments in your performance was to see all of you play in a junkyard. And I think that that is extremely profound in the sense that it's not just a way to connect with antiquity, right, with these relics. Uh, and it's not just a way to underline again the strong connection with and dependence on the non-human, but it also points to something that is very important, especially for us who live in the Bay Area, where we see a lot of people living in tents or living in situations that are similar to junkyards. And what I'm saying is that in antiquity, Hephaestus, that is the master of technology, is a disabled person. So Hephaestus is a social outcast, and still he has this extraordinary ability to make, to produce, to do things that nobody else can do. So there is a strong connection in the ancient discourse on technology between disability and hyperability. And we can even say that disability is a way to do more and differently from others. So seeing those cars in the junkyard really gives the sense that what is being cast away actually is essential for the production of something new and original and inventive. And so what has been abandoned and thrown out can actually have an extraordinary energy and vitality. And that comes across so beautifully in your performance through this juxtaposition of the visual and the sound.
That is fantastic to hear. One of the reasons that we were able to secure that location was because we had to be distanced and outside. And so once again, it was working in concert with the limitations that we were presented by our modern era, really, right? I mean, even the pandemic, that wasn't the sort of thing that could happen in the same way when we weren't as interconnected as a world, right?
Yes.
And so it felt very significant to be kind of surrounded by this decay, but very structured decay, and to be in that setting. And it's interesting that location is actually they in addition to kind of hosting these beautiful, I would consider them art pieces, but they also have this. They also do actively kind of work on race cars, right, Ellie? Isn't that kind of what that?
That's right. Yeah. I also do some amateur endurance racing as a sort of in another life. I have friends who live on a farm in Oakley, about an hour from the Bay Area, that graciously allowed us to descend on their space for a moment. They also have a separate kind of garage space, but this particular location that you saw in the video is called the Field of Dreams. So all walks of life. But the thing that's so interesting that kind of ties it all together is how a lot of these cars had another life, and they're reborn either as a race car or as a project of some kind, and in our case, as an art piece, and we kind of exist among, this decay, but also kind of creating something new out of it. So I think there's a lot of symbolism from that piece.
Well, I have many other comments to make, but I think we are running out of time. But again, I'm deeply thankful to you for giving us the opportunity to listen to something as beautiful and sophisticated and as this. And I thank my chair, Nelly Olienses, for making this possible. And I hope that there will be another opportunity to hear your work. And definitely, I will show this video to my students. I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you so much, Mario, and Ellen, for hosting us, for sponsoring UC Berkeley Departments of Classics and Rhetoric for sponsoring this event, making it available. I have people tuning in from the East Coast, from the West Coast, from England and Greece, and maybe some other places, and just really grateful for everyone's presence and support in all of this. I had linked it a little earlier, but all of the music that you heard today will be on an album coming out in a few weeks.
Great.
Which will feature both this piece and also some other new pieces by Greek composers. It's part of my mission, my organization, the Greek Chamber Music Project, to highlight the work of Greek composers.
And we will make sure to put a link to the record on our website. And also people who want to listen to this again, I want to say there will be other performances, one at Johns Hopkins, in a few weeks, right?
That's right. That's right.
And you see the link, I think below under the website, right? Under the link that you use for today, you can see there are other links to other performances because, if you hear it again, there will be so much in terms of experience that you can discover.
Absolutely. Yes. And I just put out links in the chat to both of those. But I have everyone's email, so I'll send a thank you message with all of these things also. Thank you everyone again for being here.
Thank you. Okay. Take care, everybody. And thanks, Adrienne, for being here with us. Thank you. Take care.
Oh, you're muted, Adrienne. I would love to hear what you're saying.
Thank you so much. This was just an ethereal, wonderful experience, and I'm so honored. Thanks for including me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.